Welcome to Hip Hop Movie Club, a show that harmonizes the rhythm of hip hop with the magic of movies. Today, we're discussing All the Streets Are Silent, a documentary chronicling the convergence of hip hop and skateboarding in New York City from 1987 to 1997. We're three old heads who put their old heads together to vibe on these films for you. I'm Dino Wright, podcaster, filmmaker, longtime hip hop fan, and I got to see Moby play Maxwell's in Hoboken for the Music Snobbery 5th anniversary show. So if you know, you know.
I'm JB, 80s and 90s nostalgia junkie, longtime hip hop fan, and I owned this one skateboard here as a kid. This is a Nash Jammin' soundboard. It actually had a radio built in on the bottom, but the darn thing never worked after multiple attempts and changing out the batteries. But yeah, I'm not a big skateboarder, but I had this one.
Nice. I'm Boogie, the DJ, longtime hip hop fan, and I used to try to skateboard, but I wasn't very good. I was more of a BMX bike person.
In this episode, we'll answer the question: how influential was the skateboarding subculture to the rise of hip hop in New York City in the late 80s and 90s? We'll give you 5 key takeaways to make you a smarter hip hop movie fan. All the Streets Are Silent is a 2021 documentary which details the close connection between the vibrant subcultures of skateboarding and hip-hop in the late 80s and into the 90s. Along the way, we see some legendary hip-hop acts in their early days on the come-up.
And here are 5 things you need to know about All the Streets Are Silent. Skateboard crews in New York City helped promote and propel the culture of hip-hop. Club Mars was a major venue for any hip-hop act trying to break through into the big time. Like Club Mars, a lot of superstar rappers got early exposure on the Stretch and Bobbito radio show. Watch this film to see the origin stories of the New York and Supreme streetwear brands. The New York mixtape was the flashpoint of skateboarding and hip-hop's symbiotic relationship, which helped blossom both subcultures into multi-billion-dollar industries.
All right. So let's get into it and talk about that first takeaway about skateboard crews in New York City helping to promote and propel the culture of hip hop. As I'll talk to it a little bit, tee it up for one of you guys as well. So I just thought that, these cultures, these two subcultures were very similar in the fact that there's also, they expressed kind of a sense of rebellion. In New York City, which breeds originality and creativity, these kind of two subcultures emerged like at the same time and grew and supported one another. And I just thought it was awesome that Eli Gessner, who documented this and narrated it, was just a genius for doing so. But you want to talk a little bit more about how these skateboard crews helped to promote and propel the culture of hip hop?
But yeah, so they were both kind of on the outskirts. I mean, skateboarding in New York, they were actually kind of divided at first. You see, most people viewed skateboarding as a white sport or something that white kids did in the suburbs. And hip hop, at the time was primarily Black and Latino. But you see how because they were both on the outskirts of what was the mainstay of Manhattan, that they started to kind of come together. I mean, skateboarding, a lot of times people view it as a nuisance. It gets in the way, causes traffic, whatever, accidents, people get harmed or whatever. So they kind of stayed to the side and were kind of trying to find a way to get into, the mainstream of what was going on in Manhattan, because, Manhattan at the time, of course, you had at the time, $1 million industries going on. You had banking and everything going on all throughout the city. And hip hop at the time wasn't mainstream at all. It wasn't nothing like we see now. It was primarily like underground, and they didn't play it in discos or anything like that. So yeah, it was just the perfect blending and the perfect marriage of two subcultures. You see the kids trying to make it and trying to look for something better, and you have hip hop artists who are also at the scene, or they're trying to get into the scene, try to make themselves get themselves to a better place as well. And it just the documentary was pure genius to just record what was going on and to have that hindsight of, okay, I'm just going to record this and just kind of put it away for later. And he said that, I was like, wow, like if you really knew that he actually was, documenting this historic happenings. I don't even know if he had that idea that it would get this big as it did now. But I'm thankful that we were able to watch this.
Is that all right? And your thoughts to this?
Yes. For one thing, totally agree. The amount of archival footage shot by Eli Gessner is astounding. And as a filmmaker, I feel validated that he just shot everything. Like he never turned the camera off, it seems. So, years later, 30 years later, it all came very useful. And so big ups to him for doing that. This documentary did really feel like a skateboard mixtape too. Like it had very much felt a hip hop soundtrack to not only the skateboarding that happened, but like the countercultural stuff that skateboarding and hip hop was doing, like this rebellion, this like expression. You didn't really see this in the other sort of main pillars of hip hop. It's another way of graffiti, right? To skateboard in the middle of the city. I remember a lot of people thinking that graffiti and skateboarding were kind of seen as similar kinds of nuisances in urban areas. And so fast forward 40 years later and it's like celebrated and it's multi-billion-dollar industry. That's kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
It's a nuisance until it makes money, and I can get into that later with Supreme, but really worth watching just for that kind of like time capsule, like you like to say, JB.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite phrases, is time capsule, because there's the archival footage that you mentioned of these rappers and skaters. Yeah, the graffiti, like you mentioned, is also seen a lot on the skateboards themselves. You saw on the back of mine, there's like some graffiti. Almost a good percentage of skateboards have some form of graffiti on them, and the stickers and all that. And artists like Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, like they emerged from the scene. And I think DMC, Don McDaniel, said, like the skaters, they really liked punk. And then they started shifting and they really liked hip hop because it was like underground and it was out of the ordinary. And it was kind of the sense of rebellion and outsiders. And then it kind of followed the same trajectory of the Beastie Boys. The Beastie Boys started out as like a punk crew, and they morphed into a hip hop act. And there was a synergy between the skateboarding crews and the Beastie Boys as well. And I think, a lot of these characters you see in here, or, true, not so much actors, but these are the people in the scene. Like Harold Hunter was the black skater, was one of the faces of the movement. And that was like unique to have a black skateboarder. And then, he helped propel the hip hop culture as well.
Yeah. I mean, even like you talk about, punk and hip hop lyrics. A lot of the lyrics, some of the lyrics were very much the same too. Just different, different genre of music, but same message coming across. We want kind of what's ours, and we try to be overlooked. We want something better as well.
Right. So, these crews were out there doing their thing and then enjoying some of the hip hop. And then our next takeaway was club bars was portrayed in this documentary as such a major venue for any hip hop act that was trying to break through into the big time. We saw that Yuki Watanabe was a co-founder of Mars, and he had been a club owner elsewhere. And it's kind of like Eli and his crew had befriended Yuki. He starts up the Mars Club, and that really opened up the doors for a lot of these up-and-coming artists, which goes to that time capsule motif that we're talking about. Boogie, you want to take us through like some more about the Club Mars and what you discovered there and some of the acts?
Yeah, so Club Mars became one of those clubs that like as I mentioned earlier, hip hop wasn't necessarily playing in the disco, but Club Mars gave hip hop a voice and a form and a stage to present itself, so people could come there and hear kind of whatever they wanted to hear, and it wasn't necessarily just a hip hop club. Now Mars had multiple floors; each floor had a different theme, so you can go throughout the floors and hear different genres of music. But the one thing that made Mars unique was that it did include hip hop in that format of layering through the different floors. So you'd have many acts that would come through, different DJs. One of my favorite DJs is New York staple. Funkmaster Flex got his start there. Moby got his start there. Dress. Well, actually, the Black Sheep, both of them started there as DJs. And Dress decided that, hey, while I'm here, I'm going to show them I'm also a lyricist, and started rapping and rhyming. So, and they ended up becoming an actual act from playing there as well. We've seen Busta Rhymes emerge on the scene with the leaders of the new school. DMC was also there regularly, and he talked about, if he was there, Run was there. So, I'm talking about the different acts from their generation that would come through as well. But yeah, it was the place to be. And even these skateboarders who weren't necessarily dressed in traditional quote unquote nightclub attire were allowed to come through there. Then they would come through the basement entrance, and they would come up into the club, and they would hang out and mix and mingle amongst the different artists who were there. And then with the release of the film Kids, they were like celebrities. They're talking about, oh yeah, I was hanging out with Leonardo DiCaprio, or I was hanging out with this guy or that guy. So they were almost like local celebrities that were kind of embraced by the artists themselves that from being there, and it was just a phenomenal place, and it looked like a really cool environment. I mean, I've definitely heard of the club. I didn't necessarily know who Yuki Watanabe was, but yeah, it's it was amazing.
Well, Donna Wright, reflections on what we saw about Club Mars?
Yeah. So from Club Mars sprang a lot of things, including copycat hip hop shows. They talk about Sean Combs starting a different thing called Daddy's House that was trying to bite off that vibe. And then from Club Mars came the Fat Farm clothing label and other clothing labels. So Russell Simmons started Fat Farm, that sprang forth from Club Mars. Rappers got their start there, as you mentioned. I think they said that Zoo York's headquarters was like a block away eventually.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that area of New York, very fertile for this creative expression. And Club Mars was the place to be for that.
Yeah, I was fascinated by Yuki Watanabe's story. He also had a club in Boston called Club New York, ironically. And he had given Africa Bambaataa and Grandmaster Flash gigs, as well as a young Madonna.
Yeah, that was great to see. That was really cool.
That was crazy. And then, Boogie, you mentioned a whole lot of acts, but also Almighty KG from the Cold Crush Brothers and Kid Capri with all his mixtapes was out there. DJ Clark Kent. Q-Tip would stroll in. Guru, Kool Keith. Ice Cube even came out from the West Coast. The Jay-Z footage with Jazzo.
Oh yeah,
absolute legends. Absolute legends.
Watch this film for that.
Yeah, and even like not even hip hop, but other pop culture icons and celebrities like Mike Tyson would buy out the place on occasion, buy out a floor, etc. And Vin Diesel was a bouncer there for a time, and then was it Yuki? Yuki said, I can't remember the guy, the Zoolander guy. I was like, Ben Stiller. He's like skinny guy. I was like, oh, I guess Ben Stiller had like a day or two as a bouncer somehow. I was cracking up.
The smallest bouncer here.
Man, but I think it was around from 88 to 92 was when Mars was really in full force, and then unfortunately, due to some gang violence outside the club, Yuki had to shut it down. But Club Mars, you were saying you were just looking, Boogie, elsewhere. There's like some Facebook groups and some other YouTube videos about Club Mars back in the day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you could definitely go down a rabbit hole looking for old Club Mars footage. And yeah, and there's
Yeah.
definitely a Facebook group. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. It's like it's like a support group. It's called what is it called? Called, oh yeah, Club Mars NYC 1989 Facebook group. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a reunion page. Yeah. It's like I see those things with like Dancing on Air and stuff. If you were on Dancing on Air back in the 80s,
Dancing on
enjoy this clip.
Air.
Oh man, with all the girls with the
Philly
Aquanet.
had to know that.
Yeah, that's right.
Philly has to know what's up.
So the third takeaway is, like Club Mars, a lot of superstar rappers also got early exposure on the Stretch and Bobbito radio show, which was part of Columbia University. That was a Columbia radio station.
Mm-hmm.
Is that all right? You want to talk a little bit about Stretch Armstrong and Bobbito show?
We see a lot of early footage shot by Eli Gesner of early Busta Rhymes, early Method Man and Ghostface freestyles, and it's hard to imagine now a radio show that people would stay up to listen to and record on cassette tapes. I can't think of anything that happens right now that's just like that. We live in such a time-shifted society that was there such a thing as appointment radio? This was appointment radio at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
So you skate all day, you go clubbing, and then you end your evening listening to a radio show from an Ivy League college.
Yeah.
You can hardly make it up, but that's what they did.
It's wild. I mean, there was no SoundCloud, there's no internet, and if you want to hear the latest and greatest, like up and coming acts, if you were really into hip hop, that's where you would hear them on the Stretch and Bobbito show. The footage of Busta Rhymes freestyling, and then Jerobi from A Tribe Called Quest was in there, and several other guys that it just blows your mind. Large Professor. Boogie, what are your memories? You were talking before the show about Stretch and Bobbito, how you had heard of them back in the day, and even in Newark and stuff. You want to talk about your experiences?
Oh yeah. So yeah, Stretch and Bobbito, they were a hip hop staple. I mean, I didn't necessarily stay up and listen to the radio that much to hear them as they were live, but I definitely recall, walking through downtown and you see vendors, street vendors selling, Stretch and Bobbito mixtapes. So you can buy a mixtape and actually hear, some footage from the Stretch and Bobbito show. And some of the mixtapes would be like a greatest hits, and it would have like all of the latest freestylers that hip hop freestyles that would come through the radio show. I remember also when they used to go up to the Rucker Park, and Bobbito was like the announcer, and he would just have some of the funniest stuff to say, and kind of like, actually, yeah, he would kind of like how A1 got the start. He would be on the mic announcing, and if somebody got their ankles broken, he had all kinds of jokes for them, or if somebody lit it up and it was on fire, like he was on it, and I always thought they were pretty cool. But the way they started out was kind of funny too. I remember they were talking about this one DJ, and in the documentary, was talking about the guy, and he was like, "Oh, he's really tall." And I'm thinking to myself, like, I wonder if that's Stretch Armstrong. And then they started saying something else. I was like, nah, that's not him. And then I remember they started mentioning the toy, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're coming back with it. The toy, yeah, Stretch Armstrong, the toy that stretched really, really elastic. And I was like, yeah, that was him. But yeah, those guys were, they're still revered throughout the community. They contributed so much, like by boosting a lot of these guys start now. Like now, if you want to get your start, all you got to do is just sit in your room and record something and put it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. Back then, it was almost like you had to prove yourself. Go somewhere and just freestyle. You couldn't just say handwritten rhymes. You had to prove that you had lyrical skill and lyrical prowess. And those guys provided a format for that. So the community of hip hop and culture should be grateful to them for allowing that to happen.
Right on. So takeaway number 4 is we're saying watch this film to see the origin stories of the Zoo York and Supreme streetwear brands. We see these names and these brands out there, but you really get to see how they originated by seeing this film. I know that briefly. So Eli was called by Russell Simmons to start up Fat Farm line of clothing as well, which was really the first hip hop clothing line. And then Zoo York was launched in July of '93, close to where Mars was headquartered. But that was after Mars had shut down. But it was interesting to see how these startups would take shape and then take off. Boogie or Dynamite, you guys want to add to origin stories of Zoo York and Supreme?
I can share about Zoo York and Supreme a little bit. My brother happens to be a very big, long-time Supreme fan, so I got wind of it early on. But what's fun about Supreme in particular is that they took their logo, they basically bit off of an artist called Barbara Kruger, and they mentioned this in the film, so see that too. But Barbara Kruger, her art is about capitalism, and so kind of deconstructing capitalism, and so the choice to copy her style for the logo is either inspired or ironic or maybe ignorant. I don't know. It's kind of funny because at first Barbara Kruger wasn't all that bothered by it. It was when a different streetwear brand called Married to the Mob copied Supreme. She put them both on blast, and I'll read the thing that she responded to with this. Her response was, "What a ridiculous cluster F of totally uncool jokers. I make my work about this kind of sadly foolish farce. I'm waiting for all of them to sue me for copyright infringement." It's so good. But
Wow.
what works well about the actual logo itself is that it's very recognizable. It's only white text on a red rectangle, and it works. And so they've gotten a lot of mileage out of just that. And I know Boogie can talk about their drops and their collabs and the craziness that happens at 10 o'clock on drop day.
Yeah, so like first, like I didn't even realize that Zoo York and Supreme were skating brands. I mean, that blew my mind because like where I live at, you don't really see you don't see any skateboards really at all. I mean, unless you go, a couple minutes outside, like maybe South Orange or Maplewood, but mostly around here, you don't really see too many people on skateboards. But yeah, I definitely was familiar with Zoo York and Supreme, and I actually own items from both of them, and had no idea that they were skating brands. But while I think Zoo York might have faded a little bit in popularity, Supreme is still going very strong. I mean, they do these crazy collaborations with Nike all the time, where they'll take like a pair of sneakers that are pretty basic and really well known. Like, for instance, they'll take the Air Max sneakers, very very plain format, and they'll slap that logo on the side, and those things will sell out in a matter of minutes. Like if you don't log onto the site
StockX.
at 10 a.m. to get that drop, it's going to take a minor miracle to get them at retail. And I mean, and when I say like at retail, I mean they're retailing for at least $200 for a pair of for the sneakers. And if you miss the retail, you could pay upwards of thousands of dollars for one pair just because it has the Supreme logo on the side of them. And that's just the sneakers. Like they'll have like hoodies and rain windbreakers and windbreaker pants, and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
But all stemming from skateboarding. It's like what?
Yeah.
So the chronology of it was Zoo York launched in July of '93, and then Supreme opened up April 1st, 1994, which gave these skaters like a nice a place to hang out and socialize. The lines became outrageous with the popularity. It was a massive success, the Supreme stores.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember walking by the Supreme store when I was in New York. This was like maybe about, I would say maybe like 8 or 9 years ago. And I walked past the store, and like it was packed inside. I mean, but I was like, yeah, I can't afford none of that stuff, and I just kept walking. I can't do that.
Yeah, it's crazy how this smaller subculture would grow to become such a lucrative business, and we'll get to that in our next point here, which is a final takeaway.
Before
Go
you go to
ahead.
that,
Yep.
we should mention Kids, the Larry Clark film from 1990, which basically was a commercial for Zoo York. And
Yeah.
before the Zoo York mixtape, which we'll get to in the next takeaway, comes out, Kids comes out in 1995. It's the documentary. Well, it's not a documentary, but it's basically almost like a historical fiction about the skateboard culture in New York. It launched the celebrity of Harold Hunter, one of the famous New York skateboarders who was also black, and so that we mentioned him earlier. And also it launched him probably maybe into his downfall too, because he didn't live much longer after the movie came out. I just remember seeing it that summer when it came out, and I still get kind of chills about it. It was very affecting. There's a lot of sexual assault in this movie, and it's pretty gritty. I remember thinking I needed to take 3 successive showers after watching this film. So very affecting, very powerful film that was centered around the skateboard culture back then. So definitely, watch this documentary and then go see Kids, because you really get to see it in action.
Yeah.
I had the same reaction when I saw Kids. It was during our college years, and I was like, my jaw dropped, because it's called Kids, and these are literally kids, teenagers, and so much, like you said, there's sexual assault, there's abuse, and drug use, smoking, and chaos. Yeah, at such a young age. Realize these guys were some of these folks that were featured in this documentary were the stars in that movie.
Yeah. I remember I saw it much later, and I don't remember how I stumbled upon it. I think I was watching something and they mentioned it. I said, okay, I remember hearing the name, and I went and watched it. I think I was probably in my 30s when I watched it. So you're jaw dropping and watching it, in your late teens, early 20s. I'm watching it in my 30s, and I'm like, what? Like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. But I mean, it's the reality. I mean, that was their reality. You know. So good, bad, or ugly. I mean, or indifferent. That's what they lived. So, I mean, I just used it as a study of what was going on at that time.
So the final takeaway is the Zoo York mixtape was the flashpoint of skateboarding and hip hop symbiotic relationship, which helped blossom both subcultures into multi-billion-dollar industries. So, to see the growth of these regional subcultures. Well, hip hop was, as we talked about in prior episodes, was regional. Starting in the South Bronx, and no one knew it would go this far, like Biggie says. The skateboarding also was small subculture. You had Tony Hawk in California out west, and people thought that was just out there. And then, this subculture of skateboarding here in New York, and just blossomed. And the two subcultures kind of fed off each other for a bit there. Boogie, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, so the Zoo York mixtape was, I mean, I'm going to find an equivalent, and I would liken it to the N1 mixtape, which we mentioned on previous episodes. So as Stretch and Bobbito are having their shows, or as different artists are coming through, we're at this time going through Mars, there's all kinds of archival footage or recordings from both, and they had the idea to play video footage of skateboarders, throughout New York doing their different tricks, and have the backdrop to these performances. So you get a very contrasting view to what most people realize. Most people outside of the city viewed skateboarding as like JB said, with Tony Hawk and the palm trees, and they had the perfect skating parks and things like that. But now we have these skateboarders in the urban jungle of New York City with hip hop backdrops to their tricks, and it spreads like wildfire because it's so intriguing. It's catchy. It's the new thing. It's against the norm because it's not playing, the popular songs that you're hearing necessarily on the radio, but you're hearing this new stuff, the stuff that, is coming out, and, people want to be a part of it. And then you hear it, it explodes from there. You can go to, Supreme, the Supreme store, or you see, you might run into one of these guys there. You're wearing a New York, and you're wearing the same gear as the guys were wearing in the mixtape. It's an instant connection. You don't have to go out of your way to make that connection. You can just walk down the street, or walk around the corner and go to the store and just instantly be connected.
Yeah. There's a unifying force between. Somebody mentioned it in the documentary. It's like, there's also like these rich kids and these poor kids, and like skateboarding kind of drew folks together. And also with hip hop culture and skateboarding, there was a guy, Vinny Ponte was mentioned. He was a DJ and a skateboarder, so he was like doing both things, promoting both cultures. And I think he was tight with Raekwon. So yeah, it was pretty cool to see all that. And then you fast forward to where we are over the years. It's skateboarding, which used to have its own competitions with the X Games. It was kind of like, this is extreme games. And now it's into the mainstream with being added to the Olympics over the years. And as we're recording, we're gearing up for the Summer Olympics in Paris, and you'll see skateboarding, half pipes, and all types of things there. And then the money aspect of it. Right, you want to add to the blossoming of the subcultures? Yeah.
Sure. You can see, it's fun to see the origin of skateboarding and hip hop as these components of culture, and then you get to see the end result, the end stage of it, where Supreme gets acquired for $2.1 billion. That's quite a valuation for streetwear brand, a skateboarding streetwear brand. The Zoo York mixtape in 1997 is the point where it becomes more widely known, mainstream. You see people wearing Zoo York and Supreme and not have a connection. They mention this in the movie. They talk about who's a poser and who's not. At this point, it doesn't matter anymore because it's so mainstream that you don't have that connection anymore to actual skating. The movie ends with this kind of, here's where we are now. It's almost like it's part of the backdrop now, but back when it was hot, it was white hot.
Yeah, I like how they did kind of like an epilogue at the end where it showed you some key statistics regarding both cultures. How like skateboarding surpassed like a $2 billion industry. I mean, Supreme itself sold for $2 billion, but then like how hip hop and R&B surpassed rock and roll in popularity and sales in 2017. And there was a one skateboarder, Huffnagel, who had his own brand. He sold his own brand for $63 million. And it talked about, unfortunately, there was the tragedy along the way. You mentioned Harold Hunter. He would die of a drug-induced heart failure around age 31. And then there was another skateboarder that died, I think, of a brain aneurysm in his early 40s. It may have been Huffnagel. I'm not sure, but one of those guys died.
I think that was Keith Huffnagel.
It was him, yeah.
And
so he had turned a huge profit on his brand. Unfortunately, he died not too much long after that. And one of the other guys from the kids had died. I think it was a suicide or something.
Justin Pierce died of suicide not long after the movie came out. Maybe I think it was 2001. I think around then. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a thing that what Boogie was saying is like these guys that were in these crews, and then some of them were in the movie Kids, and they were recognized by some of the celebrities, like hanging out with Leonardo DiCaprio, and then somebody said Biggie had recognized Harold Hunter at one point.
Yes.
So it's like, wow, how about that for these kids that are just like
you're on Biggie's radar screen? That's pretty good.
Yeah. That's pretty good. Yeah. You were in that movie, Kids. Yeah. Wow. I mean, it just blows your mind. And becoming a celebrity. And again, this is before social media and things really going viral. So that made it even more impressive.
Yeah.
To be on Biggie's radar, and there was no cell phones to take videos, no social media, nothing to make things go viral. It's wild.
There's not much time in between when Kids comes out and when Biggie gets killed. So that happened really between 95 and 97. That's pretty
true.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's eye-opening documentary for sure about the connection. I had no clue how intertwined these subcultures were. I knew there was some overlap with the graffiti and the art, and them both being subcultures, but to see that all, work together in that symbiotic relationship was interesting, powerful.
Bring that funky flick back.
So, I mean, I think we all three of us really enjoyed this one, but I guess we'll rate it like we normally do. So, Boogie, for all the streets are silent, bring that funky flick back, or leave it in the vault.
Bring that funky flick back. I'm definitely going to watch it a few more times because I'm pretty sure that I'm going to grab some more knowledge nuggets out of this one.
All right. Dino, right? All the streets are silent. Bring that funky flick back, or leave it in the vault.
Same here. Bring that funky flick back.
As for me, I will also bring that funky flick back. I love these, what I call time capsules, where you can see the archival footage of these young superstars of the hip hop world. It's
definitely
delightful.
one thing to see them. It's one thing to hear about it. It's another completely different thing to see them actually in their element.
Yeah. Like you said, Dino, keep that film rolling. You never know what you're going to capture.
Yeah. The documentary, 40 years in the making. Pretty good work.
Yeah, right.
Hip Hop Movie Club is produced by your HHMCs, JB, Boogie, and Dino Wright. Theme music by Boogie. Whether you're listening to the podcast or watching us on YouTube, please give us a subscribe or a follow. It's a real power-up for us. Thanks for tuning in.
And remember, don't hate, skate. What else would it be today?
Skate.
What a gem that is.
Now I miss my dashboard with the graffiti on.
Yeah. So actually, I was telling you guys, I actually won this one on Double Dare. So that's.
Bring it. Come on. Bring it. Come on.